My guest on this week's episode of Suds and Search is Keith Goode, SEO Product Director at Cox Automotive. Keith has over 2 decades of experience in digital marketing. He's an in-demand conference presenter. A short list of the conferences where you might have heard Keith speak include PubCon, Digital Summit, SMX, and Advanced Search Summit. Keith has also served as a judge for various search marketing award shows, including the U.S. Search Awards, Interactive Search Awards, U.S. Social Media Awards, and Global Search Awards. He's held senior SEO positions with some of the largest brands in the world, including IBM and Dell. He's also served as a brand ambassador for the SEO tool suite SEO Clarity. A little less than a year before our conversation, Keith started a position at Cox Automotive, the parent company of Dealer.com. For Keith, this meant a significant career transition from performing SEO for a website to resolving SEO issues for a website platform that thousands of automotive dealerships use. How has the transition gone? What is a typical day like at Dealer.com? Who are the stakeholders involved in making decisions? I'm going to ask Keith these questions and many more. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Keith Goode. We'll chat about prioritizing technical SEO tasks. We'll talk about doing SEO for large-scale platforms instead of just websites. And stay tuned to check out Keith's Star Wars-themed home bar. You don't want to miss it. All right, Keith Goode, welcome to Suds and Search. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. This is one of the all-time best backgrounds we've had here, so I don't want to miss the opportunity. I'm just drinking a Hopper's Hell from a local brewery in Western Michigan that I'm really fond of. What are you having to drink?
I thought I would go easy on myself today because I can make some really complicated cocktails, if you can't tell from the bar here. This is the Goode bar. I can't come up with anything creative, like a really good name. But, you know, I thought I would go easy on myself and just mix up a Dark and Stormy, an actual Dark and Stormy, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So you want me to get that started?
Yeah, let's do it. I want to see how this goes.
All right. So the Dark and Stormy is, it is a cocktail created by the Gosling's rum company out of Bermuda. So there is a specific way that you have to make it in order for it to be an actual Dark and Stormy. If you, for example, don't make it with Gosling's, you're not having a Dark and Stormy. You're just having a dark rum and ginger beer drink. So I'm just going to mix up the drink really quickly. You'll see how easy it is to make. It's basically just a half ounce of lime juice and ginger beer. So I'm going to take the lime juice. I'm cheating because I don't have as many cocktails. Yeah, I don't have as many cocktails as I used to back when, before the pandemic, people would come over and enjoy my beverages. So I keep it on stock here. And I'm going to do something interesting here. I'm going to go ahead and just put in the ginger beer, which, by the way, has to be Barrett's.
I was going to say, the ginger beer is going to make or break this drink, isn't it? Yeah.
So this is just the official recipe by Gosling's. And if you have it with anything but Barrett's, it's not a Dark and Stormy. That's a little known fact for you. I feel like the Cliff Clavin of the search industry. And then finally, sort of as required by law, I'll probably get sued if I don't do this right.
Of course.
2 ounces of Gosling's dark rum. And this is the last of that one. And I'd like to pour it on top because it creates that nice little layered effect.
It does.
On there.
Very pretty. Nicely done.
That is a Dark and Stormy.
Well, Keith, you are a man who really understands this show, so I appreciate everything, the background. The Dark and Stormy looks great. Next time I'm in Austin, I might have to see if I can come visit that bar. So.
Please do. Yeah, anytime.
Well, listen, I haven't caught up with you in a while. You've got 2 decades of experience in this field. You've worked at some of the biggest brands in the entire world.
Yeah.
I don't know, a little under a year ago, maybe 10 months, 11 months ago, you made a change. You're now at Cox Automotive. You're learning all this automotive lingo that I've had to learn over the past few years. What has that transition been like? Hey, tell us about these last 11 months.
Yeah, it's been an interesting transition. I was at IBM previously. Prior to that, I was at SEO Clarity, working as their global evangelist for SEO, which means I taught a lot of classes. Prior to that, I was at Dell And prior to that, I was at HomeAway, which is now the RPO, which is part of the Expedia group. Prior to that, I was at AMD. So yeah, like you said, a lot of the big companies that you can be a part of, I was a part of. The thing about my previous experiences is that I actually worked on the specific site, whereas at Cox Automotive, I am the product manager, the SEO product manager for dealer.com, which is a platform that dealers use to build their websites and attract customers. So it's less about optimizing a website than it is about optimizing a platform. So that's been a really big transition, because there are things that I can affect as a product manager for SEO on Dealer. And there are many more things I can't affect, which are going to be related to whatever the client decides to put on their website. As I'm sure you're aware, they might put marketing scripts out there, tracking scripts, and those things can break the experience. And that has nothing to do with me, but I have to look into it sometimes to be sure. Yeah. So it's been an interesting transition for me to go from working on a website to working on a platform and trying to understand how SEO from a technical standpoint affects 12 plus thousand websites as opposed to just one. It's a big transition.
It's got to be interesting, and that's kind of where I want to take our conversation. For those people listening who are not in automotive, it's hard to overstate how big dealer.com is. I mean, just 12,000 automotive dealerships on the platform. It's a big undertaking. I guess the thing that comes to mind, I get anxiety sometimes when I talk to guests who don't do what I do. So there's, anything you do, there's going to be changes. Any change you make to that platform is going to impact thousands and thousands of businesses potentially. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of people interested in every single change that you make at dealer.com. Are you finding it's a lot more eyeballs on it now? So are you finding that there is a different sort of, I guess, customer service challenge doing SEO for a platform versus what you'd experience doing it for websites?
Well, fortunately, I'm as a product manager, my immediate stakeholders are the analysts who deal with the customers, not me, and the product teams, as well as the executives. So I'm a little bit sheltered from that. I have dealt with a number of agencies and some clients who have persistent problems that I've tried to get in and help them resolve. Tried to figure out if it's something that's related to the platform or if it's something related to their specific implementation of the platform, or if it's a third-party problem that has nothing to do with our platform. So my contact with the clients has been fairly rare, but it's a completely different way of working, because you are having to think about not just fixing a problem for tens of thousands of sites, but you're having to find a way to fix it without breaking the sites of, say, 10% of those who have a custom header, for example, that your fix would break, for that matter. So we're having to figure out unique ways of scaling changes that won't break the current experience that dealers have on their websites.
Yeah, it's a challenge I could see. I mean, just the scale of it, I guess, is what I was getting at in my first question. It's like, it's one thing to know a lot about technical SEO or technical aspects of SEO, but it seems like you'd have to know a lot about SEO and how big companies operate to do your job. Yeah. So to make a change, it's possible you have to have stakeholders, like not just developers, but marketers, leadership, internal people, salespeople on the front lines, the analysts that you mentioned. That's a lot of, that's a lot of people to keep in mind. Maybe a lot of soft skill work.
It is.
Even if you have a great SEO recommendation, you're still going to need to get buy-in.
Yeah.
What do you have? Give us some tips about working within a large group like that to actually make progress.
Well, that's fortunately one thing that hasn't changed by moving to a platform as opposed to working for an individual website. When you get buy-in at the product level, it's not about necessarily making estimations of traffic to specific keywords like you would with content, for example.
Right.
We're going to drive X amount of traffic to this page. It's more about what is, answering the question, what additional funds will this make for us? In other words, can this make us more money? What amount of money is this going to save us that we're having to spend now? what future costs will this prevent? So it does sort of roll up to costs, but it's also really important to understand how to set up what I like to term the LOE, LOI matrix, which is the level of effort versus the level of impact matrix. And the idea behind this is that if you have a change that is very low in effort, but is very high in impact, that's going to be your number one priority. If it's a high impact, high effort item, that may be something you want to add to your roadmap. If it is a low effort, low impact type of change, that's probably busy work for you. But if it's a high effort and low impact change, that's probably one you just want to never do. So setting up your individual problems and tasks into that matrix is a really good way of winning with executives, because they can look at that matrix and understand, okay, this is going to give me the biggest bang for the buck. This one's going to cost a lot of money to implement, but it's going to have a really big change. So let's make sure that that's on the roadmap. So yeah, LOE, LOI. I push this out as much as I can because I think it's really important to understand, for SEOs to understand how they need to speak to executives in the language that really appeals to them. So I was in David Bain's SEO for 2022 book and the sort of accompanying webinars. And this was sort of the gist of what I added to that book.
I love it. And you're very good on this, like the prioritization work. I wanted to ask you about a tweet I saw that you had that was really good recently. I'll read the tweet exactly. It said, one common aspect of technical SEO most people don't talk about is the overwhelming number of imperfections you could address, but probably shouldn't. You said this all goes back to prioritization. Does it matter? Yeah. So sometimes, I guess the point you're making here, like how much effort and how much impact, sometimes it's important to choose what not to do as it is to choose what to do. So if I could, tell us a little bit more about that. How do we prioritize tasks? And is that matrix the key, or is there more to this, more meat on this bone that we could talk about?
I think it's so the matrix itself will help you visualize what the priority should be for these items. Right. The getting there is sometimes a matter of just experience, and I really feel bad for SEOs who are just getting started because they don't necessarily have the experience to know that, I don't know, changing a title may actually have zero impact, on what you're trying to do. Or one of the things that I've run into is spacing issues. So, for example, our platform, and it's not necessarily unique to our platform, this happens a number of times, doesn't necessarily deal with spaces the same way that it deals with other characters. And so in some cases that might be a %20 showing up in the URL itself. And in some cases that might be a plus mark that shows up in the URL itself. And sometimes that might be a hyphen instead. I'm working on it, but honestly, I can't put a lot of priority on it, because when I look at GSC, Google's like, we figured it out. We know what's going on, so don't worry about it. So there might be a brand new SEO that looks at it and says, oh my God, this is a serious problem. We have to fix this now. Can we get priority on it? As an experienced SEO, I can look at that and go, no, Google's fine. Right. Here's how we tell that Google is fine. We go into GSC. We see how they're sending traffic to that page, or how they're canonicalizing that page. It's really interesting. And that really just comes from experience.
I agree. Yeah, that's a great share. So, going back to the job at Cox Automotive, I wonder if we could get down to a tactical level here. Like, when I think about this job, I have a hard time even picturing what a typical day would be like, or if there is such a thing as a typical day for you. What sorts of things are you working on? Yeah, is there a typical day for you there?
There are typical types of days for me. There is not a typical day for me. So a typical type of day might be, for example, the day that it's completely loaded with meetings. And so as a product manager, I am responsible for being present in a lot of the development meetings that may or may not necessarily have anything to do with me, but I need to be there in order to hear and listen for anything that might potentially impact SEO. So, as a result, I'm in a lot of development meetings that I'm sitting there sort of, in some cases, twiddling my thumbs, in some cases, checking Slack, email, those types of things. But my ear is always listening.
That's good to say. But then something comes up and you got to jump in and save the day. I get this. Okay.
Yep. So there are those types of days. Other types of days there, which sometimes are rare, are actual work days where I can sit down and I can plow through something like Deep Crawl, or I can dig through Screaming Frog, and I can start looking for patterns. And that's one of the things that I find as an SEO product manager for a platform. I have to look for patterns. I can't look for individual problems. If it's an individual problem, it may be 100% unique to that site. But if I see patterns across several sites, then it's a problem that I need to be addressing. The thing about that is I have to almost be vigilant all of the time, looking for these types of patterns that might indicate a deeper problem that I need to address. So, those work days are days where I come in, I look at Deep Crawl, I look through everything, I'm looking for patterns, I'm looking for real problems. I'm digging into the developer tools in Chrome, and I'm actually reading line by line through the code and looking for reasons why this might be happening in these cases, but not in these cases. That's pretty much the essential SEO product director role, I suppose, is meetings and work.
Interesting. Is it, so you came, I mentioned you came from big in-house job. Are the teams constructed similarly? Are there major differences between how you're siloed in that company versus how you were in other places you've been?
Yeah. I actually, to be frank, I prefer the setup we have right now. Okay. Our team is situated as part of the product organization. So CAPG, Cox Automotive Product Group, is the group that we're in. And I have found that to be the most effective place we can be to be SEOs and affect change across the entire platform, as well as all of our other sites. So, there's me working on the dealer.com platform, right, but then we have other SEOs working on AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book, and any of the other platforms that Cox Automotive has. And so I'm very happy being in the product team. I've been in marketing organizations where, quite frankly, sometimes it comes down to the sort of the trend du jour that the marketing director is interested in following. And so he may be seeing TikTok being a big issue or a big thing that we need to pursue. And he's going to put SEO on the back burner while they go and they hire a social media company to handle all of their TikToks and Instagram moments and everything. So that has been very frustrating in the past, to be frank, especially working for some executives, and I won't name names, though I'm really tempted to, who know absolutely nothing about the online marketing sphere. And they don't really realize that SEO is kind of one of the fundamental building blocks to an online presence. And that's been frustrating in the past, but again, I'm not naming names.
Yeah, I like it. The little shiny object syndrome. I guess.
Right. I've been there. I had a CEO, in fact, one time who we never could get anything done because it was every 2 weeks he'd discover something new. And this was back in the early 2000s. And so there really was something very interesting every few weeks popping up as a new startup started this venture and went after this product, started developing this tool or this app. And he had a little bit too much ADHD in order to keep the company sort of focused on what it needed to be focused on. So sometimes I would lose out to Twitter, for example, or sometimes I would lose out to
because it was that day. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So this was a tough environment to work in. But right now in CAPG and in the product group there, I'm extraordinarily happy. Everybody takes SEO seriously. I have full executive support behind me. And if I ever, call them and ask them for something, it's done. And if I need to have them yell at somebody, they go yell at them. So it's a wonderful situation.
I like it. It does sound good. So, the last thing that I was going to ask you about the job. So Cox Automotive is ubiquitous at conferences and automotive all over the place. You've had a long and impressive list of conference presenting.
Yeah.
COVID has really reset the whole conference presentation world. As we're filming this, MozCon is going on, and so it's maybe, who knows what's going to happen. I don't know what the next 6 months look like, but are you chomping at the bit to get back on stages? Is that something you aspire to do within Cox Automotive? Where's your head on this?
Yeah, well, it's one of the interesting things about this industry in general is that there is I hate to put a gender on it, but there's a brotherhood, a siblinghood of people who are on the conference speaking circuit that, we all know each other. We all like each other. There's very little animosity. I've known Greg, for example, for ages. Right. So well before I ever got into the auto industry, I knew Greg Gifford. And we've been, on stage together. So I don't necessarily miss the speaking as much as I miss the camaraderie. However, the speaking itself did put me in a position to have to sort of be innovative in my job, so that I have something to share, and learn more about how this technology affects us or how this change at Google affects us, so that I could then present that at a conference and not sound like I was giving the same presentation over and over again. So yeah, in many ways, I am really desirous to get back on the road. The last conference I spoke at live was PubCon Florida, which was last August, and got back and immediately worried for the next 3 weeks that I had COVID, but I didn't. There were people that got it at that conference, but I was fortunately not one of them.
I was there, and I also was testing negative afterwards. So, well, listen, you mentioned him, so I want to get to everybody's favorite part of the show. This is where Greg Gifford gives me a question for the guest with no context. So I don't know what he maybe gives me 1 or 2 words, and it's a bit of a high wire act for both of us. So for you, he has Star Wars. What does it? Are you a giant Star Wars fan? What is the story here?
Yeah. I'm sort of sad that I have such a limited angle on my camera right now, because this is a Star Wars inspired bar. Off to my right is our 3 shelves of helmets, including a 40th anniversary Darth Vader helmet, Stormtrooper, Patrol Trooper, and 2 Mandalorian helmets. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. Greg and I both were Star Wars kids growing up. He and I are both in the same guild in a phone, an app on our phones called Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. So we're actually, friends in real life, and we're also friends in this virtual thing. So yeah, Greg and I are both huge Star Wars fans. I think he leans more light side. I tend to be, look at me, I'm wearing black. So
you're on the dark side. I like it.
Tend to be dark side, Sith,
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned the brotherhood, sisterhood of the speaker community. It's unbelievable how many Star Wars fans there are in the industry. So I'm sure you guys have plenty to talk about it at dinner.
Oh yeah, every PubCon in Vegas, there is a Star Wars T-shirt night where we all get together, wear our favorite Star Wars T-shirts, and a winner is picked from all of them. And again, that's something we haven't been able to do in 2.5 years. So,
wow, that's a strong no context Greg question. So, right before we got on, it sounded like there may be some breaking news that you've done some podcasting in the past. Is there a podcast coming in the near future that we could announce here today, or do you want to? Do you not want breaking news on Suds and Search today?
Well, so the thing is I really feel bad on a search podcast to talk about something that's not search related. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you mentioned, the Austin Otaku podcast, austinotaku.com, is also available on all of the podcasting platforms. Was the brainchild of Jesse McDonald and me, where we wanted to essentially meet with our industry peers and talk about hobbies. Well, it ended up expanding, and we talked to a lot more people than just our industry peers. And that was a lot of fun. But of course, the pandemic happened. Jesse and his wife had a child. So, as a father yourself, I'm sure you're aware that time suddenly gets limited when you have children. So the podcast essentially died off. But I'm hoping to start up a new podcast here in the next month on the dangers of listening to lyrics in 80s songs. And I'm going to it's a 10 episode podcast. I'll go through year by year, 1980, 81, 82, 83, and so on, and take the top hits from those years and go through the lyrics and from a psychological standpoint and just explain to the world how creepy a lot of those lyrics really are.
I love the premise for this show. I will be tuning in. For anyone who's wondering, what does otaku mean, by the way?
Otaku is the Japanese word for nerd. It's Otaku. And essentially, it translates literally into nerd, but it actually just means someone who's extremely interested in something. You can be an otaku that loves train schedules, or you can be an otaku that loves collecting garlic. I don't know. But it basically does mean just someone who's extraordinarily passionate about some subject. And so we wanted to tap into what our industry peers were passionate about. And that turned out to be everything from heavy metal to board games to video games to various sci-fi franchises, comic books, the whole 9 yards. So it was a really good podcast series. Highly recommend you to listen to it. You might be able to, find some embarrassing moments on there for some of your favorite people in the industry.
I will make sure to link to it in the show notes. So last thing before we go, anyone who's listening and wants to learn more about you or dealer.com, where should they go to connect? What's your favorite social media to connect with people on?
I tend to post mostly on Twitter. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at twitter.com/Keith, Keith, Goode, Goode. And that's Goode, like goose with a D.
That's all right.
You want to know how to
awesome. Well, Keith, you've just been a great guest. I love the cocktail.
Me too.
Really interesting to talk to. Continue to do this great work you're doing at Cox Automotive and with dealer.com. And I'm going to give you a virtual cheers. I'll sign off for now. And for everyone watching, we'll be back next week with another episode of Suds and Search. Thanks again, Keith.
You're welcome. Take care.